It's really an honor and a privilege to have been asked to speak here this afternoon. I can't think of a better reason to come home to Vermilion or a group I'd be happier to address than the graduating class of Lakeland College 2013. The last graduation I attended was actually my sons from 4-year-old preschool. They also got little caps and a diploma right before snack time and singing a song about how much they love school. It was all very cute, and you are sitting a lot more quietly than that group, I assure you. Although going to the zoo has an entirely different meaning to that crowd. I myself am actually, not yet anyway, a graduate of a post-secondary institution, so I am in great admiration and awe of those who make it through. But I had a very different idea of what I wanted to do when I finished high school. And that idea had been more or less forming, in my mind anyway, from the age of 7 years old. And that was that I wanted to go to the Olympic Games, and I wanted to be an international ski racer for Canada. And when I think back to that time in my life, of trying to decide, or trying to know where to go and what to do, and what the right decision for me really was, what path to go down, I feel very fortunate because I ended up deciding to follow my intuition and my instincts and ultimately my heart. And I ended up, even though it was a very unconventional road to go down, and ended up being fraught with incredible, sometimes seemingly insurmountable challenges and obstacles, often leaving me asking myself if I'd really had made the right decision. In the end, it all worked out okay. And I'm very happy that I did what I did and made the choice that I did. I was very young when I started cross-country skiing here in Vermilion. I did grow up here, and in spite of the fact that I once heard Red Green describe cross-country skiing as sort of like alpine with the fun taken out of it, I liked it. And I liked racing. It was fun. My friends were doing it. Our house bordered the provincial park, so I could actually literally ski out the back door. The racing was social. It was a chance to get out of Vermilion on the weekends and go to places like Edson and Red Deer. And my career followed a pretty natural progression, up through the ranks, junior high, high school, until I graduated from high school. And I joined the Canadian national team and started to race the World Cup circuit, which took place mostly in Europe. So I was spending my winters then in Europe with the national team. And there in Europe is where I learned some of the greatest lessons of my life, and some of the lessons that would propel me forward and up the ladder internationally as I moved on with my career. The first lesson was never give up. I was a kid from Vermilion, lining up at the start line with racers from Norway, and Sweden and Russia and Germany. I remember looking at the start list the night before the race and counting how many women were in my race were named Olga. It was a lot, okay? There was a lot. And, and having moments after these races too, with devastating results, really finishing very close to the back of the pack. One of the running jokes on our team then again was, the only way you were going to see a top 3 result was if you turned the results page upside down. So kind of sad, but true. So we had some really tough years, and my ski career starting out in Europe was particularly fraught with challenges. I found it incredibly hard, really hard. And I felt like in addition to fighting against all these, barriers and obstacles, there was also this unspoken belief that the podium was reserved for Europeans and it wasn't a place for North Americans. That widely, by and large, the best we could hope for was a top 30 result. And I often caught myself thinking, I don't belong here. And yet I persisted. For whatever reason, I chose not to give up. And after years and years of picking myself up again, after terrible races and terrible seasons and terrible results, and trying to learn from every experience and continually searching and coming back every spring and making lists of what I needed to do to improve and what I needed to work on here and what I needed to change there, things finally began to change. Because what I learned is that it doesn't matter how many times you fall down. What matters is that you keep getting up. And eventually, if you keep persisting and you keep trying and you keep believing, things will change for the better. I chose not to buy into the belief that the podium was reserved for Europeans, and I chose not to believe and buy into the idea that all these factors we had to work against, like travel and the limited resources and the attitudes we were facing, were going to be a disadvantage. Most importantly, though, I chose to believe in the possible and what could happen if I just kept trying. So at 27 years old, after nearly 20 years, that's a long time, I know, of training and working and moving through these heartbreaking disappointments and abysmal results and challenges and obstacles, things began to change. Finally, I became a contender on the World Cup. Finally, I could realistically imagine a podium result on the World Cup or at the Olympic Games. And finally, I felt like I belonged. And I remember a conversation I had with our sports psychologist, a gentleman I had worked with for the year leading up to the Salt Lake Games in 2002. It was the week before the race, and I had become established to the point where a medal at the Olympics was not a totally unrealistic thing. But it had never been done before, right? It had never been accomplished by a North American woman or a Canadian. And I said to him, Terry, okay, we've come so far, and I'm standing here at the door, but how do I know I can do this? How do you know? How do you know it can be done? And he said, well, you don't. And I said, great, what do you mean? But he said, you don't know what you can do. Nobody knows what you can do. But you don't know that you can't. So take a chance on that. Go down that road. Try that option. Let's find out what can't be done. And so I did. I went to the start line of the Olympics race that day, focused and prepared and inspired and feeling positive, but also ready to seize this day and this moment, this opportunity that had come to me and I had worked so hard to get to. And now was my chance. All I had to do was take the step and walk through that door and seize it. And I'll never forget that race. It's been plus 10 years now, and I don't give myself a lot of credit for having a good memory, but that one day I really remember well. And one of the moments I remember best of all was in the final moments of that race, the 5x5K pursuit, because there was a hill, a really long uphill, right before the downhill into the sprint for the finish. And I was skiing in a pack of about 6 women, every single one of whom, one was from Russia, one was from Norway, Italy, Sweden, and me, the Canadian. And every single one of those women was capable of crossing the line first that day. And we rounded the corner, and we started up this uphill. And the Canadian coaches and technicians had placed themselves all up the hill, so that while I was skiing and racing in this pack, one of them was running and cheering the whole time and then would sort of tag off to the next one who would take over. These guys are fit, but they're not that fit. So that as I was skiing, I was never alone. And someone was always with me and always cheering, sustaining me with unbelievable energy and momentum and magic. And I felt like on that day, with that force of energy from these technicians, that it gave me the energy I needed to make that final sprint for the finish and cross the line that day 1/100th of a second ahead of the woman behind me and step up to the podium for Canada. Canada's first ever in cross-country skiing. Thank you. Thank you. It was magic. And even to this day, I find it hard to find words that adequately express what it feels like to to live a dream and then have it become reality. And the celebration that ensued, I remember coming back here to Vermilion with the parade and the reception with 3,000 of my closest friends. It was just such a full circle moment, you know, to come back to the town and the place and the community where it all began. The story doesn't actually end there, and many of you know it by heart by now because it went on for quite a long time. But I was awarded a bronze medal that day, and today I hold a gold. And in between, yes, I was awarded a silver. I am a Trivial Pursuit question. I am the only athlete who's had all 3 medals for just one race. No, I didn't get to keep them all. I did have to give them back, but you know, I got the gold, so that's all that matters. But the reason is that the 2 women who finished ahead of me that day were later caught for doping and using performance-enhancing drugs illegally. In the years leading up to those races, I had become aware of the problem in our sport, which was the abuse of performance-enhancing drugs. And it was a problem that really left me frustrated and angry and feeling cheated a lot of the time. And I remember having a conversation with my mum prior to the Salt Lake Games. And my mum is a pretty honest, pretty frank. Some of you who know her will agree, I'm sure. But I remember saying to her, you know, and lamenting and complaining about this problem in our sport, about the unfairness and the injustice. And she said, and I was obviously looking for some sympathy and some empathy at the time and support. But what she said to me was this. She said, if you know there's a problem and you're not doing something to change it or to be part of the solution, then you're part of the problem. And it really hit me then that I had a choice to make. You know, I could continue to be a part of the problem, continue to feel like the victim, continue to suffer through what I felt were injustices, or I could try to make change and be part of the greater good. And so I made that decision. And it took a lot of courage. You know, it took a lot of courage to find a voice, to confront some very powerful people and some very powerful organizations around the world. But every time I wavered, or I had doubts, or I wondered if this was the right thing, I came back to my values and what it means to live your life with integrity and to be true to yourself. And in the end, the result was change for good for our sport. And a short while later, the opening of doors to organizations to become a part of that I never would have dreamt I'd have the privilege of being a part of. Today I hold a seat with the International Olympic Committee and the World Anti-Doping Agency, the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sport, all because I made one simple decision, which was to be true to myself and to live my life with integrity and try to be part of the solution, the greater good. So that's where I'm going to leave you this afternoon, with 2 simple messages and 2 important wishes for you, especially the graduates, as you go forward on your journey. And the first is be true to yourself. Be who you are. Find and follow the dream that's right for you, no matter how crazy or unconventional it might seem. If you do it with courage and with inspiration, and you don't give up and you persist through the challenges and the obstacles, you cannot go wrong. And the second is to be part of the greater good. Use your voice to make a contribution for the better. Be bigger and about more than just yourself. We all have the power to make a difference to someone or something, somehow, in some way. It can be a big contribution or small. It can be to someone individually, the community as a whole. You have the power to make a difference. And I invite you to please use that power. Seize the moments when they come to you. Step up, challenge yourself, and dig deep to find the courage that you need. Because nobody, not even you, knows what you can't do. Thank you very much, and congratulations once again, graduates of the class of 2013.